Welcome back. We're talking with David Valdeo, Kristin Olsen, and Linda Haldeman about this year's state budget. Governor Brown campaigned on the pledge that there would be no new taxes without a vote of the people. And it's looking like getting a temporary extension of a tax increase on the ballot and getting it passed this summer may be a mountain too high. Without any increase in the state revenue, there will have to be drastic cuts in many state programs that the public has come to take for granted, like education. So do you think the voters are ready for an all-cuts budget?
I'm not convinced that that is the only alternative available to us to save money. Revenue comes from jobs, and when we do things that create jobs, we actually don't have a need to raise taxes because our tax base goes up. I'd like to see us do regulatory reform regardless of what else is done in the budget, because that is what is costing California its jobs.
But how do we solve the budget this year? I mean, the budget is due this year. How do we solve that if we're not going to go toward taxes? Money's got to come from somewhere. Do we kick the can down the road? Do we do bonds? Do we use accounting gimmicks like they've done in the past? Or do we bite the bullet and just do the cuts?
I don't believe in gimmicks. They haven't worked before. They've simply brought us to where we are today. But there's plenty of opportunities to make government more lean. And we do see that our problem is we like to spend a lot of money and not set priorities. In my view, priorities should be public safety, including fire, education, health. I don't understand why we have so many duplicative agencies and departments and places that suck up a lot of taxpayer dollars, and yet they don't benefit our state.
But the question is $12 billion. That's the question. I mean, are you saying that there's, they've already cut $12 billion, which is 15%, and now if this doesn't happen, tax increase doesn't happen, it's going to be another 15%. So we're talking about a 30% reduction in the state budget. Are you saying that there's 30% of fraud, waste, and abuse and duplicative services in state government?
I think that there is, but more important, what we will see is a quicker economic recovery, and it'll take us out of this recession. We'll grow out of it instead of tax ourselves out of it. I'm not thinking just about today's budget. I'm thinking what is going to happen for the Central Valley for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. This is where I live. It's my home. I don't want to be in the same place 5 years from now.
Well, we do have to deal with this year's budget. So what do you think, Dave? Do you think that we can go to an all-cuts budget?
I've actually seen a lot of areas in the committees I've sat on that we did not make the cuts we should have. There's vehicles that are being replaced that have no need to be replaced, and we're spending money because one regulatory agency.
Now you're a farmer, right?
Yes.
And so you use probably your tractor is what, 30 years old?
No, actually I have some newer tractors.
Do you have some newer ones?
I have a couple.
Most farmers I know, they hold on to those tractors for a long time.
Well, we try to save money, but when there's an opportunity to buy a new piece of equipment, you buy it, but you buy it for the right reasons. Right now, we've got people forcing a government agency to spend millions of dollars on new vehicles that they're perfectly fine. You've got agencies in California that run at a cost 10 times the national average. Why aren't we making cuts in those departments and looking at those to make the savings?
Well, I wanted to put something, a graphic up that the LAO was asked to put together an all-cuts budget and what it might look like. And so if you take a look at the chart, it talks about K through 12 education, eliminating the K3 class size reduction. Kindergartens would have to start at 5 years old, and enrollment. I have a 5-year-old, so that's relevant, I guess, to me. Community colleges would increase their fees significantly. Universities would increase their fees. Second and third strikes under the 3 strikes law would have to be for serious and violent offenses. Government workers would have to take about a 9% pay cut plus increase into their health care contributions. Transportation funds would be reduced. These are all pretty draconian cuts, it looks like. What are your thoughts about looking at this list of potential cuts?
My response is there's no easy way out of a $26 billion deficit. That's an enormous problem, and there will be pain associated with the cuts that we have to make. But if we continue to kick the can down the road, then we're just being irresponsible. Yes, to answer your question, yes, I would support an all-cuts budget as long as that budget also includes these long-term structural reforms. There's nothing more important than finding ways to grow ourselves out of this economic situation that we're in.
Let me follow up with a quick question. We've only got about 15 seconds, but is this too big a problem to handle in 1 year that we need to phase in the correction as opposed to, is it too much too soon?
Some of it we might have to do some phasing in, but we can't continue to delay the problem. That's what we've been doing. So you'll hear a lot of talk about how we're going to shut down schools for 5 weeks. Well, you'll see in that LAO proposal, there's nothing even close to that with an all-cuts budget.
I think you just scared a lot of parents shutting down schools
and
for
that's
5
just
weeks.
not going to happen. But people are talking about that. We have to make reasonable programs and cuts, but there is going to be some pain.
Okay, well, when we come back, we'll talk about public employee pensions and whether or not they're costing the state too much money. That conversation when we return. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. We're talking with 3 newly elected state legislators, and a lot has been written about public employee pensions recently. From state legislators to Tea Party rallies, a vocal backlash is rising against what some perceive is a too generous retirement package for state and local government workers. For many taxpayers, it's a question of fairness. Why should the public employees receive better retirement packages than the recession-battered private sector? Some lawmakers have argued that public employee pensions are bankrupting state and local governments. Others say that such criticism is based on broad generalities and the facts simply don't match the rhetoric. So, which is true?
Certainly we need to start to model our public pension system more closely to the private sector. We have what's estimated to be a $500 billion unfunded pension liability. That's 5 times the state's general fund. It's clearly not sustainable. So we have to start working, Democrats and Republicans alike, to address that problem. And if we don't begin to address public pension reform today, we're just delaying the problem, compounding it, and that's not fair to anybody. So yes, it's something we need to address immediately.
What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, you're basically pitting the private sector versus the public sector, and people that work really hard are trying to save their dollars, and you've got other sides trying to take their money to give it to another group.
Now, you might have some teachers that say that they work pretty hard too, so.
But you've got lots of people that work really hard and are responsible with their money, and you want to obviously honor promises made, but you've got to be careful of the promises made in the future and find ways to fund what we need to do. You want to have a benefits package that attracts people to come to work for our schools. You want to attract people to come work and hire the best for our fire and for our safety, but there gets to a point where a lot of other people need to be looked at, and we need to concentrate on what needs to be there and how to fund it. But it seems like Sacramento's always looking for a new way to hire more people, and we need to find a way to have the people that are there be more efficient, scale down the department, scale down a lot of the employees that don't need to be there and serve no real purpose to California.
Well, you know, I do want to talk about the pension issue specifically as it relates to public safety. It's interesting that even people that criticize public employee pensions kind of take a hands-off attitude toward police and fire. Yet when you look at local governments, 60%, 70% of their budget is public safety. And you take a look at the pension issue specifically, those are the folks with the 3% at 50 equation where they get 3% a year for their pension. So if they start at 20 and then end at 50, that's 30 years times 3, that's 90% of their salary in retirement. So should public employee pensions, specifically public safety, be on the table?
They should never be first in line. And one of the things we have to realize is that not all organized labor is created equal. When we're talking about public safety, police, fire, sheriffs, there is absolutely no reason to not prioritize them in the budget. I'd also remind you that Fresno has one of the best funded pensions for law enforcement in the nation.
The city of Fresno as opposed to the county?
That's correct.
Okay. What is your feeling on that? Because this is kind of a difficult issue. Even Meg Whitman, when she was talking about public employee pension reform, she stayed away from public safety. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've always stood up for public safety. They're the ones that keep our families safe at night. And out where I live, it gets pretty rough. I live out on a farm, and we've had a lot of copper thefts. We've had a lot of in-home invasions, especially friends of mine have been broken into. So no, public safety is important to all of us, and that's why they're always the ones. The reason why they're always the ones on the forefront is because that's the hot button issue that taxpayers seem to agree with. They like public safety, they like education, and they want to fund those things. They want to take care of those people. And then,
should they be off the table?
Well, they need to be looked at and make sure that there's no abuses, and because there are abuses in every department in California.
Tough issue. What do you think?
Yeah, it is a tough issue, but police and firefighters put their lives literally on the line for us every day. We have seen that firsthand in Modesto with a couple of our firefighters a couple years ago. It's devastating. But no, I don't believe that anybody can be completely exempt. I don't think they should be first, as Assemblywoman Halderman said, but nobody's exempt. And even the police and firefighter unions, if you talk to them, they know that the current system we have is not sustainable. We need to work together to find a system that will allow allow us to recruit and retain the very best employees, but at the same time uses taxpayer dollars more wisely.
Very quickly, another one, about 30 seconds. Any quick reforms you'd like to see in public employee pensions?
Yes, I think we need to start having an equitable employer and employee match in who pays for the pension, and I also think that we need to raise the age limits. Those are the first two I would start with. There are a number of others, but those are the first two.
Any suggestions?
Model more closer to the private side.
More like a 401k type plan? Any suggestions, Linda, about how to improve the situation?
Sure, I would start with the non-critical services, the state workers, and use more of a defined contribution plan.
Which is a 401k for our viewers who don't know the difference between the defined benefit and defined contribution. It gets very technically complicated.
I would not recommend that for law enforcement at this time, though. We cannot afford to hit that sector hard, especially in a down economy.
Okay, well, when we come back, we'll talk about some specific projects like high-speed rail and an adequate supply of water that some think will get our economy moving again. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report.